Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of ITWeb TV. My name is Chris Tridger and I'm coming to you live from Cape Town ahead of the ITWeb Security Summit tomorrow at the ITWC. With me I have Siobhan Gorman. She's a partner at the Brunswick Group and the keynote speaker at tomorrow's event. Thank you for joining us tomorrow. I'm glad you're happy there. So tomorrow, I know the focus of your presentation is going to be on state-sponsored cyber attacks, right? They're nation-state cyber attacks and Western. But for those out there, you may not be all that familiar with the terminology. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, of course. And I think the state-sponsored cyber attacks are really only a part of the threat landscape that organizations are facing these days. But as you see more and more geopolitical conflict kind of taking hold, right? You've had Russia and Ukraine for a while, but we also have China, Iran, and North Korea, and others sort of seeing a lot of geopolitical convulsions happening in the world, and they see that as an opportunity to start going after the companies and countries that they consider the adversaries, but just opportunities for hafty, because sometimes you have these hybrids of state-sponsored being government-oriented attacks, but they'll do it on companies because, let's say, the Chinese government or the Iranian government is trying to prove a point to the U.S. government. They may decide that it's easier to do that by attacking companies in a particular industry to make a point, say, about banking and sanctions or something along those lines. Or the Chinese, for example, may go after companies that they feel hold key intellectual property, or may also have like defense secrets, right? The defense industrial businesses in the U.S. certainly are fending off kind of Chinese state-sponsored threats all the time.
Right. And I mean, so this is sort of state-endorsed, state-backed,
Yes.
sort of orchestrated attacks and orchestrated incidents.
Yes.
And with
On companies.
Yeah, with the objective to, like you just explained, right?
Right,
So,
exactly. So, if a country feels it is in conflict with another country and wants to get back at them in sort of an asymmetrical way, they can use a cyber attack to either go after a company and disable, say, critical infrastructure in a way that makes it, more chaotic for a government to respond. Or they may go and steal secrets. Sort of, it's old-fashioned spy stuff, but you can do it at much higher volumes if you're going in and you're breaking into a database of a company, say, has defense secrets.
right. And from the research you've done, having written in mind, it certainly comes across here. It seems as if these incidents are increasing, state-sponsored attacks are already increased.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about the tectonic shift in cybersecurity. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that it's sort of a tectonic shift in the geopolitical relations right now, right? I mean, things are fracturing within the West, right, between the U.S. and Europe and other countries. Things are sort of fracturing between, Russia and others in Europe, obviously, as well. Over Ukraine, things are fracturing between China and a whole host of other countries where, they're seeing potential opportunities, but then also potential conflicts, right? And so I think when you overlay that sort of geopolitical complexity and that kind of low-level conflict, right, aside from, say, the Russia-Ukraine war, maybe Israel and Hamas, you don't actually have. It's not like it's a world war or anything, but you have a lot of competition happening, and companies get caught crossfire sometimes because they're easier targets for other governments to attack. Like I said, often it's critical infrastructure or something where the impact of either taking, say, infrastructure offline for a while if you're a cyber attack, or going in and, planting what they call logic bombs, which then allows, say, a government to go and sit and wait inside the infrastructure until if and when there is a conflict, say China wanting to make sure that it has its positions preserved if there's a conflict over Taiwan. And so we're seeing more of that, I think, these days. China in particular has been very active against the United States. And, North Korea and Iran kind of keep going up and down. Russia's pretty persistent.
Right. And I mean, if you consider the sort of level of geopolitical uncertainty and instability, how does that play into the increase in sophistication and volume of these kind of cyberthreats?
Yeah, I think that the geopolitical uncertainty creates higher volume, right? Because as let's say threat actors, it could be state sponsored or it could just be criminals, it could be cyber criminals. And as they perceive that there's distraction happening in the wider world. And that could be, economic uncertainty creating a lot of distraction within the business community, kind of global really right now.
Yeah.
It meaning that instead of paying attention to making sure they're sort of continually updating their cyber protections, they're worried about, how are the terrorists going to affect overall revenue streams and how are we going to be planning against that. And so whenever there's that kind of distraction, it creates opportunities for cyber criminals and any kind of cyber attack.
And you also mentioned before that hybrid attacks are not particularly closely to organizations. When you stay one,
Hybrid meaning?
Yeah, so it's state actors taking one sort of a hybrid.
Oh, with criminals. Yeah. So I think what that does is it just gives enhanced capabilities to criminal organizations. And so what we've seen is, the sophistication of, government-sponsored cyber attacks is very high. They're really good at finding their way into, say, a company's computer system, undetected, for sometimes years. And they're very good at stealing information as they need to, and then if they're trying to create operational disruption as well, they'll do that on their way out. So they'll go in, they'll take data quietly over time, and then they'll sort of blow things up on their way out. They know that the company will realize that someone was there, but they're pretty good at covering their tracks because it's, a government agency with a lot of resources, and they can leave. And so increasingly what we've seen is that you will find cooperation, particularly in Russia, but also sometimes in China, between government and sort of criminal groups, or the government kind of saying, hey, we're going to look the other way. If you want to go after that guy, you get it.
Yeah.
And over time, there's also some knowledge transfer that ends up happening. And so the criminal groups over time become almost as sophisticated as fairly recent, state-sponsored attacks. And usually that sophistication is either in how they get in undetected, because increasingly we're seeing attacks sort of initiated, not necessarily by putting, using attack software or malware, but using no credentials, login, data that exists somewhere else, and you're able to get somewhere else and then use it to gain access to a company and then time to spread from there. And so those kinds of attacks are really hard to detect, and that's also the kind of thing that typically would be state sponsored, but we're seeing now from criminal use as well.
Right. So, and then obviously sectors are pretty much at risk. All sectors are pretty much at risk, especially those that cater for or facilitate or really critical services.
Yes.
Can you tell us what kind of sectors really should be on the alert in terms of cyber attack?
Sure. I mean, the financial sector is always a big one, but they're also the most sophisticated. Almost in any country around the world, the financial sector is going to be ahead of others in terms of cyber defenses. So they obviously need to be on the lookout, but they also are pretty good at that kind of defense. I think healthcare is actually the one that's of greatest concern, because typically they're not necessarily investing in cybersecurity the way the financial sector is, but lives are on the line. And also even just patient health data is very lucrative to sell on the black market, and the criminals know that. And so let's say they're doing an extortion attack, they'll go in, they'll steal that data, and knowing how valuable it is and knowing the companies or hospitals or whoever are more likely to pay to buy it back, pay the ransom, because of the sensitivity of the patient data. We worked on one incident actually where it was a healthcare provider, and I assume it was for insurance reasons or there was some medical purpose to it, but they had lots of photographs that were pretty graphic of patients in that had wounds and things like that, and they send those pictures to the company and basically said, we're going to post this online if you don't pay us money. And so I think that there's the overall value, if you will, of the data and the operations, right? I mean, if you take out hospital operations, lives could be at stake, and have been. So I think that that's one that stands out as particularly concerning. Electric and energy is just because everybody is so dependent on it. That's one definitely to keep watching out for. And I think public utilities, also water and things like that, will also, end up getting caught up in cyber attacks as well.
So I hear your presentation. Well, I don't want to give too much around it, but you're going to be discussing a little bit about third-party exploitation, supply chains. Obviously, AI is a very dominant thing that's going to come into the discussion, as well as consolidation of the industry.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of final thoughts that you'd like to give on a bit of the work before you end? And see if you're delegates to.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the areas that everyone is still trying to figure out what the implications are is AI, and sort of whether it's going to be more to the advantage of the attacker or the defender. I think everybody can probably agree that one thing AI will do is make both sides more efficient. It's more a matter of like who can do it first.
Yeah.
And so I think that is one that is still kind of an unanswered question in terms of who's one to pull to benefit from the advances in AI. But I do worry that right now it's in the defender's favor, just because they have such a low bar to meet in order to get in. And so having those capabilities advance at a faster rate feels like they have a little bit of an advantage, at least at the front end.
Excellent. Thanks so much for your time, Siobhan. It's been brilliant to speak with you. I'm really looking very forward to your presentation tomorrow. So have a good evening. Thank you.